Hello, today is Saturday the 11th of May 2024 and I am in Switzerland in Canton Graubünden at the cabin called Fergenhütte at 2150 meters, and today was a very adventurous day, much more adventurous than I had planned or hoped, but not necessarily in a bad way. So long story short, I came back from the US maybe like 2 weeks ago, and I didn't really have anything planned this weekend, and I thought, why don't I pay a visit to a mountain cabin that's not manned and see if what the conditions are like up there, and see if there's any work that needs to get done, and just spend the night and then go back down to Zurich on Sunday. So I came to this cabin, which normally doesn't really have anyone, and it's pretty much like self-service in terms of your experience. And I started this morning basically in that valley. Well, I mean, not here, obviously, more to the west, but I knew I wasn't going to be alone on the mountain because I checked the reservation system and I knew that there was other people coming to the cabin, but I suspected that I would be, or we would be, the first people to get to the cabin this year, because it didn't look like it had been used throughout the winter. And I did maybe the first 5 kilometers or so were kind of gentle, and then after about maybe 1,900 meters of altitude, or maybe 1,800, the snow started. And just to give you an idea, the mountain is actually quite steep. So it's about as steep as that. Maybe not quite as steep as that, but it's definitely as steep as that. And I think there were a bunch of avalanches last winter, and they completely obliterated the trail, in the sense of it's just torn up soil and rocks and ice everywhere. And I guess there was a trail in parts of where I went, but it was very sketchy, and I basically didn't see any tracks of animals or humans or anything. So I take it that I was the first person on the mountain in at least a couple of months. And I was just breaking a trail through where I thought the trail would be, because it's basically just featureless terrain like this, except where the avalanches happen. And it got very exhausting very quickly, and at some point I made it to a place that was just bare rock, like one of those black spots, and I just sat there and I was just thinking, like, this is really hard. I don't know if this is worth it, because there's nobody going to be at the cabin, obviously, because I'm the first one on the mountain. And I was just deliberating if I should push harder or not, especially in the really nasty terrain. And as I was deliberating that, 3 guys showed up from further down the mountain, and they were quite fast, but they were quite fast because they were walking in my footsteps. So and I told them that I don't know if I'm gonna continue, and we thought about it for a moment, and then they offered to break trail in my place for the final 2 kilometers of ascent. And so breaking the trail is one thing, but also the trail was really dangerous, in the sense of especially where the avalanches were, it's very, very steep. It's like that, and you have to go basically more or less across through all that debris. And I mean, I never fell, but for example, 2 of the guys, within 2 minutes of each other, fell down the mountain, maybe like 10 meters. They were wearing shorts. I don't know. I mean, more power to you, but I would never do that, because I like having technical gear. But Anyway, so they self-arrested, which is a miracle considering we didn't have crampons or an axe, but it was really sketchy. And then at some point, I mean, we just pushed through because at some point we were just maybe like 400 meters away, and I mean, the terrain was horrible, but we thought, I mean, we're not gonna turn back now, we're just 400 meters away, which by the way you shouldn't do as a mountaineer, but anyway. So when we emerged at the top of that hill there, we finally saw the cabin. And when we saw it, it was very clear that we would have to dig it out of the snow because it was I mean, not completely snowed in, but there was snow everywhere, including in front of the door. And even before we got to the cabin, we had some adventures in the sense of, see this creek? So we dropped down into the creek to get to the cabin, and when we got here it was just virgin snow, and this side of the creek, see there's like a tiny bridge, but this side of the creek was very, very steep, and we couldn't just climb it because, see, it was like that. The snow was just super soft and we just couldn't get out of the creek. And it was really, I mean, we had to basically use all of our trekking poles to kind of design this kind of like almost handlebars to push ourselves. I mean, it wasn't very dignified, and I bet it felt really miserable in shorts, but it worked eventually. And then we got to the cabin, and then the first thing I did is we got shovels and we started creating these paths that I'm walking on right now, and these were all shoveled by us. And then we had to dig out the toilet, and this was actually an interesting story because I was very proud with myself. I spent maybe half an hour moving a lot of snow to clear out this path towards what I thought was the toilet, and then we realized that the door was locked. And that's not really good news because, I mean, it's really nasty when you go to a place and you just see yellow snow, and it feels kind of like it robs the charm of the place. So we searched the entire cabin for keys and we couldn't find them. And then maybe 30 minutes later, I was just kind of in that corner and I realized that this is also a toilet, and this is just the decoy toilet. This is the real toilet. And what I mean by decoy, obviously I'm joking, it's I think this one has flushing water, or at least running water. I don't think it has flushing water, but it has running water, and the water has to be turned off in winter because the pipes will burst if it freezes, because there's nobody here. So I think they lock it just to make sure that nobody messes up with that. And then there is this toilet, so I had to dig out this other sort of path from the fake toilet to the real toilet to actually carve out the path to, you know, make it possible to use it. And then there was no water in the cabin, of course, and there's two options: either you melt snow, but I don't really like to melt snow in May because you see, the snow is very grimy. I think it's just like dust, and basically all the dust that settled throughout the winter is now surfacing at the surface of the snow as it melts. And I don't know, I just wouldn't drink that, to be honest. But we have this creek here, the Misery Creek, I'll call it. And so I thought, why don't we cut a path in the snow to the creek and then cut some steps, and then we can get water from the creek. So we did that, and it's much better now. I hope you can appreciate my architectural design. It's really weird to do steps in snow because they have a tendency to not remain square. And we also kind of like helped a little bit there because when we came today, we kind of had to just drop into the creek from that snow, and I mean, that's also not nice. So we created kind of like those intermediate places where you can put your feet so you don't have to just jump in cold water. So yeah, and then the guys that were in shorts left because they were in shorts and they didn't want to spend the night on the mountain. So, but where we came today, it was super sketchy, and there were at least 3 or 4 places, even excluding the places where 2 people almost fell off the mountain, which personally I wouldn't go back that way. Like, I would find a different path. I'm sorry. Like, that was just a one-way thing. So there is another trail that goes down this way somewhere, and they went on that trail, and they left they left just in time to have a little bit more sun so that they could make it down while the sun is still shining. And now it's kind of almost sunset. The sun sets at 8:40, I think, but because of the clouds and because we're in the mountains, although that's kind of looking west, so nothing's really blocking the sunset towards the west, but it still feels a little bit kind of you shouldn't really account for having the full daylight because the mountains might obstruct the sun. And then we got 2 more guys, and they helped with some of the snow shoveling because there was a lot of snow to shovel here. And then we also created steps here so you can actually get into the cabin, because it was just kind of like a steep wall of snow and ice. So now I can actually get to the door, which is of course nice when you want to get into the cabin. And then they helped make fire, and then they went hiking somewhere. I don't know where, but they went hiking, and they said they were gonna be back at sunset. And just to give you an idea of where we are, there's a lot of climbing to be done there, and actually if you hop that saddle there, you get into the next valley. And I mean, obviously you can only do that in summer because now it's really not the time for that, but you could if you wanted. So yeah, so that was the day. And so we were able to basically bring the cabin back to life. We cleared out access to the outhouse, we made fire, we kind of cleaned up inside a little bit, we dug out the entrances. So I think now it's in a nice position to accept guests. And tomorrow I'm going down, but like I said, I'm not going down the way I came up because that's just crazy. I'm sorry. So I'm gonna follow in the footsteps of my previous hiking companions, and I'm gonna go down this way, and we'll see where that goes. I hope it's not super sketchy, but you know, you can only hope. And yeah, so just to give you an idea of where we are, there somewhere in that valley is Freina. And at the beginning of April I tried to go to Silvretta through that valley, and it didn't end up well because I got caught in a rain and it really got me very, very cold and very miserable, so I had to abort. But this is a nice little valley. Well, it's not little, it's a nice valley. So yeah, maybe the sun comes out and then we get a little bit more sunlight. If not, I wasn't gonna make fire because inside it's kind of like close to freezing, and that's cold, but I don't really like to make fire because I feel like you have to watch it and it's kind of high maintenance somehow. But I think we're gonna have to because it feels kind of damp. So it's not the cold, it's just the dampness. I want to get rid of that. So I think we should have 1 or 2 days of fire, and then, I mean, I'm only here today, but next people should also make fire, and then I think it will. Also, when all of this snow melts, I think the dampness problem will get resolved much better, because now I feel like I'm going into an igloo as opposed to a cabin. But yeah, um, wonderful weekend. Many thanks for being helped with breaking the trail, and obviously I'm extremely grateful that tomorrow I don't have to break the trail when I go down. And with that being said, I hope this will be a wonderful season for Fergenhütte, and you know the drill. As always, see you later. Bye bye.